The ability for somebody else to step in and take that and say, we're going for a nuclear weapon is probably very plausible. Ballistic missiles are rather significant. And you saw they attacked Diego Garcia. That's 4,000 miles away. 4,000 miles could hit the UK. So they could attack basically anything within that range. That's why this is not a video game and a movie. It's not like what you see on TV. It's very, very difficult. Israel wants the complete annihilation. We're trying to get to some kind of situation or at least alleviation of where we currently are. It seems to be like there's a little friction there.
Hey guys, it's Jakson Buhaj with TMZ here. Today I'm joined by Glenn Ignazio, who is a national security expert. Now he's here today to talk to us about the current conflict between the United States, Israel, and Iran. Mr. Ignazio, thank you so much for joining me today.
More than happy to be with you. Thanks for the invite.
Of course. Now, as this conflict evolves, it seems, at least to me and a lot of the public, to get more and more complicated. Now, on one hand, you have the United States striking Iran's critical infrastructure in conjunction with Israel, and Iran is responding in another way, right? They are focusing on the Strait of Hormuz. They are focusing on striking GCC countries. They are focusing on doing things like striking water desalination plants to weaken the surrounding countries and wage war on the global economy. My starting question for you would be, who holds the cards in a situation like this? Does Iran stand a chance of winning? And what does that mean for the United States?
Yeah, it's actually a really cool question because it's sort of who holds the cards of which deck. I mean, right now, the Straits of Hormuz, right, impacting the global economy. You know, people immediately react to the cost of gasoline. You know, I get it. But the thing is that right now they're controlling the Straits of Hormuz. And interesting, for years and decades, we knew that was going to be a choke point. And so I don't think we really prepared enough for what they were going to do. So that, as you can see, globally is impacting things. And right now, Iran is holding the cards for that. Now, as far as the other things, as far as like air defenses, what's going on military inside the country of Iran and everything, yeah, our air power has decimated that. But when you look at the protesters, and this is the thing that bothers me, is the protesters oppressed, all that's happening. Bombing and attacking does not change a regime. It is just hitting targets, and those are to prepare for other things. So we can't bomb a particular government or regime to change. So something more has to happen there. The other thing I was just going to capitalize on is, attacking the allied countries of Iran. I mean, if you take a look at the UAE, they're being nailed significantly. And believe it or not, the leader of Abu Dhabi, Dubai, and Sharjah, one of their wives is actually Iranian. So they're connected to the families there. So it is really crazy to see what is going on. So there's a lot there, but I hope it sort of gives you a little snapshot of where we start from.
And from this point forward, I know Trump has been talking about arranging some kind of peace deal with Iran, but it seems like either Iran or the U.S. is dragging their feet in that regard. What's next? I mean, what can we expect to see in the coming weeks from this conflict?
Yeah, that's, again, from the negotiations, let's look at that. We always look at it from a military perspective. I think I told you I spent a career in special operations, and this is one of the things we always define what the mission is and what the extraction or the exit criteria is. And I don't think that's really been established. So let's say these negotiations go well. Okay, what could they give up? Well, they could give up the uranium, which is a big thing. But how do you verify that it's all of it? I mean, it's just the reality of it. They can say, hey, we're going to open up the Straits of Hormuz. But if we were to pull out again, if these negotiations go well, the Straits of Hormuz will always be controlled by Iran, and the regime stays in place. That is something that is actually still, actually right now, it's even worse for the countries of UAE, Saudi, and everything. So if that regime stays, again, if we were to pull out, which is an exit I think that President Trump's looking for, honestly, I'm apolitical, but the Gulf Coast countries are actually in more of a bad situation because Iran is now isolated. They just pissed off all of their friends because they bombed them. So it becomes dangerous. And the most critical point for everybody's trade is the Straits of Hormuz, and that would rely on hold by Iran. So it's a very delicate situation. I don't think it's beneficial for either right now. And that's the dangerous part, if you ask me.
I'm glad you bring up the surrounding countries, because I'm wondering how those GCC nations view their vulnerability right now.
Yeah, it's actually, honestly, it shocked me to tell you the truth. I mean, one of the things that we knew about is the Shahed drones. We knew about the ballistic missiles. We have what's called PAC-3 and THAAD. THAAD does, and PAC-3 hits these ballistic missiles pretty far out because they literally go into space. So that's what they were designed for. The same thing with this PAC-3. Now, the drone systems, we have other systems that are focused on that, a variety of different ground systems. I won't even get to listing it. We knew that was a threat. And to see the amount that is being attacked from Iran, say to the UAE, I mean, it was like a couple thousand within a few days of drones and everything. It's boggling to me. The final thing that said to me that, hey, we're not really putting the right effort to this, and the allied countries within the UAE, Saudi can step up, is when we lost an E-3 AWACS just the other day in Prince Sultan Air Base, which I've operated out of. It's pretty far deep into Saudi Arabia. How the heck did that get in? So while we attack Iran and we hit those particular targets, these drones are getting in and we're not focusing on defending that. I mean, when Israel got attacked, we stopped that huge massive assault and maybe a few got through. Now thousands getting through. So the focus is a little off. And you're right. I'm really concerned because Iran, I think, attacked a lot of the civilian desalination and everything to try to turn the countries against the United States, saying, hey, because of America, this is what we're doing. But I think it backfired on them where now they're galvanizing. And even Mohammed, God, I can't say, Bin Salman, my apologies, MBS, and Saudi is actually pushing Trump to say, hey, do the ground incursion, get this country's regime out of the way. So long answer, but man, that's a lot of detail for what is really going on over there.
You have some experience in your career with the Strait of Hormuz. And drawing from that experience, I'm wondering, do you consider the prospect of the Strait of Hormuz closing a realistic one?
Great question. Okay, so yeah, I advised some years ago who was the deputy ruler and Crown Prince of Russell Cayman, which is right at the Straits of right at the tip of the Straits of Hormuz. And one of the things that's interesting is sort of a real touch on that is like United Arab Emirates. The United Arab Emirates always believed that there was a friendship between Iran, sort of what I gave you the info before, but there was never any military buildup or anything to defend the Straits from the UAE on that side, even as an ally for US. So there's not really a military buildup in the UAE in that area to protect the Straits of Hormuz against Iran. So look at Iran now, that's one thing about my comment to UAE. But Iran both has one thing, their navy has been destroyed. Bandar Abbas, which is their largest navy base, is right at the tips of Straits of Hormuz. And the biggest thing has been these small swarm boats and the mines. The Navy's really been decimated. Some of these swarm boats have been annihilated by what we call the A-10 Warthog. Incredible airplane. Love it. Sorry, being an Air Force guy. But the mining thing is one of the things that we're watching for. We used to have demining ships or anti-mine ships in Bahrain, and they were decommissioned about a year or so ago. So the only ones that exist are these littoral ships, and they're in Singapore right now. So they're trying to bring them over. So Iran does have the capability of impacting the Straits of Hormuz, completely shutting it. I don't think so, but you got 2,000 ships sitting on both sides right now trying to get through, and they're only letting about a dozen or two through. So they have a stranglehold on the global economy, and that needs to stop somehow as soon as possible. And military might's probably the only way Iran's going to answer.
Mm-hmm. And for our viewers that aren't familiar with the Strait of Hormuz, if it does close, what would that mean for the United States economy?
Well, I think it's the economy of the United States is impacted globally by others. Like, for example, the oil and everything that flows throughout the Persian Gulf, Arabian Gulf, people call it both, doesn't really impact the United States because that oil doesn't come to us directly. But again, 20% of all commerce, oil, and everything does get distributed through there. China takes a tremendous amount. So China is affected by this significantly. And as you look, the Philippines actually have declared an energy emergency this past week because of lack of oil. So the global economy gets hurt, which jacks the United States economy up significantly, especially since we're at the tip of this particular attack against Iran. So maybe not directly, but economically, the globe's impacted, we're impacted, and you see oil or you see gas prices here in California at like $7 a gallon. So that's why I just visit California. I don't live here anymore. But yeah, that's how we're impacted.
I think the last time I checked, I think the floor for a barrel of oil was about $100 a barrel, which is crazy to say out loud. But beyond the Strait of Hormuz and oil, are there any other threats to the global economy that this conflict poses?
Yeah, there's something that popped up within the last couple of days, and that's what happened with the Houthis. So the Houthis is again another, faction or proxy of Iran that's down in Yemen. And in the last couple of days, they've launched ballistic missiles against Israel. Now you have the Arabian Gulf and the Persian Gulf basically on the eastern side, which is where all the economy flows, right? Everything that we're talking about, oil. On the western side, inside that particular area, the Red Sea and the Suez Canal and everything is another significant area that the Houthis can hit. So if there was both to be impacted, the threat globally would be more than double. So that's why I think that the Houthis are probably going to be smacked pretty quickly. And that's one of the other things that I think is a distraction from Iran. But I think the countries are going to be looking at that and shut that down pretty quickly. But that's a risk that we have to take into consideration.
Regarding the neighboring countries again, because they have absolutely felt the fallout of this conflict, are any of them incentivized to work in cooperation with Iran, or are they now incentivized to work closely with the United States, considering how Iran has conducted attacks on its surrounding countries?
Yeah, at this point, I think it's completely with the United States and allies. I mean, I have a personal opinion about where Israel should play in this. I don't think there's some things that are in sync between the U.S. and Israel. But before we do that, let's park that for a second. I think that's closer with the United States as far as Saudi, Jordan, the UAE, and everything, especially Qatar, Bahrain, and everything. Our Fifth Fleet is located in Bahrain. Qatar has always had the largest Air Force base, Al Udeid. All of these countries have been our side, and I really do think that in the beginning, Iran attacked them to show, hey, and they hold it today, because of your association with the United States, we're doing this. And I really think that there was a premise that you're going to push the United States out. And I think that was the tactic. Again, it backfired because they started attacking a lot of civilian locations and completely galvanized with the United States against Iran. So like we mentioned with MBS pushing Trump to say, hey, hit the ground. But when you saw in the United Arab Emirates, the tourist industry, I think it's like 10% of their GDP is tourism. And I don't think there's anybody planning a vacation within the next year in the UAE. So I was surprised to see desalination plants hit, hotels hit, and all this. That completely pushed many of the countries against Iran. Again, they're now isolated. They've attacked all their friends. So they're in a survival mode right now. So that's the unfortunate part that has actually occurred out of this.
Mm-hmm. What's the best case scenario for Iran?
Best case scenario. Okay, this would be utopia. Utopia would be there is a regime change. How that happens, it does take a little bit. There has to be an internal, organized, galvanized effort with the protesters, whoever, and then this is where intelligence agencies get involved, to actually push that particular leader out. But at the same time, they have support with IRGC and all those others, and that has to be taken care of. So it's very, very dangerous and not easy. But that would be utopia, because then you'd have Iran basically free, back like a Western country like they were in the 70s. You want to see some really cool stuff. Look back there, they got mini skirts. They're literally acting like they are today. They're great people. So that would be utopia. Everything else, Hormuz and everything opens up, and we basically have the biggest peace the Middle East ever. All that uranium would probably be given over to us, and it's controlled. Okay. Next thing, which would probably more probable about, is the IRGC takes over with the Supreme Allied Commander. And not really, well, actually, the current one is close with the IRGC. That's where you have an iron hand, iron fist. You have something that would be significant against the protesters and scary, and all the problems against the Gulf Coast countries and everything, and the Straits of Hormuz exists. The last thing, which I don't think we're going to get to, and I pray we don't, is complete disheveled, where you have an internal power struggle and you have all these factions fighting, and it blows up into almost like a revolutionary war. That'll probably be double than what happened in Iraq post that particular conflict. So long answer, but honestly, straightforward for everybody to understand. Those are the three options. And right now we're in the middle. But I hope we get utopia.
Earlier you mentioned you were considering the possibility that Israel and the United States were not aligned on some things. Can you touch on what those things are?
Yeah, I mean, Joe Kent was the director of the National Counterterrorism Center. Okay, that man's history is phenomenal. If you don't think he's for the United States in every way, shape, or form, he is. But he's also direct. So some people have attacked him, but there are certain components that he said that are sort of accurate. Okay, when we were negotiating with Iran, and actually you can see the body language when Netanyahu and Trump were up on stage, and Trump says, "Yeah, we're also negotiating with Iran." This is way in the beginning. You could see the body basically language of Netanyahu change. So they haven't been for that. They want Iran annihilated. They want to get rid of all their threats, Hezbollah, Hamas, everything. So when that was going, you could see that constraint. The other thing is that Israel, and you saw Rubio say this on TV, is that Israel was attacking during the day, and we needed to go with them. Otherwise, the replication or reparation would be against our troops in the area. So that was probably one of the reasons we jumped in. The next thing, the original supreme leader, Khamenei, so basically the father of this guy, he had a fatwa, so basically like a religious wall that says we'll never get to a nuclear weapon. We won't do that. But he was getting to the point of it so that he had it as defense. Look at what happened with Ukraine and Libya when they gave up their weapons. They got annihilated. So that's why he was getting to that, but he didn't want to get to the weapons. So when he was killed, and all of the 31 that were killed by Israel at that particular time when they were trying to decide, there were moderates in there and they were killed. And now it went to the son, which was significant. We didn't particularly want that, at least again, from an analysis standpoint. Israel took that shot. So I think that Israel does not want the negotiations. And that's why Trump says and does not say, excuse me, who we're negotiating with at this time, because honestly, I think Israel would take them out. Again, Israel wants the complete annihilation. We're trying to get to some kind of situation or at least alleviation of where we currently are. Seems to be like there's a little friction there. That's just reality, but they are working with us, but I think they need to pull back, and we need to tell them to pull back on some of those attacks that they're doing.
This is so fascinating to me, because I don't know if you can tell, I'm a little young, right? And so there's a lot that I don't know about the conflict. It's interesting to hear that when you mention, Iran gaining uranium or enriching uranium, and you mention the parallel where Khamenei at the time said that we don't want to develop a nuclear weapon, and that at the time the strike hit Khamenei's house with his family, there were moderates in the room. It's difficult to digest, right? Because for the past 30 years, we've been saying that Iran has been developing a nuclear weapon. And I'm wondering what that says to you about this conflict as a whole. Was this a justified attack?
So into that particular situation. So this is really, I think, the knife edge of where people are. And so the idea that they were going to get a nuclear weapon, Khamenei was old, and supposedly he was on the edge of health. So as soon as he was to pass away, which probably within the next year or two, the ability for somebody else to step in and take that and say, we're going for a nuclear weapon is probably very plausible. Again, in that 31 that was trying to decide who to replace him, there were probably some moderates, but most of them are very hardened. They've been doing this for 40 years. They've been planning war against Israel and the United States for 40 years. That's why this is not a video game and a movie. It's not like what you see on TV. It's very, very difficult. So I think that we were going to get there. So going from, say, 0 to 60% in uranium enrichment is very hard. Going from 60 to 90% plus, which is where you get into that weapon, is actually pretty easy. That can take a couple of weeks. The other one takes months. So the probability of getting to a nuclear weapon is rather significant. The other concern is if that uranium was given out to Hezbollah and Houthis and distributed, even more dangerous. The other thing is the ballistic missiles. The ballistic missiles are rather significant. And you saw they attacked Diego Garcia. That's 4,000 miles away. 4,000 miles could hit the UK. So they could attack basically anything within that ring. And so Iran has a capability with their terrorism. The missiles, putting a nuke on missiles is very complicated. I don't think we're going to get to that. But I do believe that they were very close to getting a nuclear weapon. And I think it was just the supreme leader who probably only had another year or so of life that was holding it back, and then it was going to change. So I think that's the biggest threat. The terrorism, they've killed thousands of both civilians all over the world, Americans, British, everything. So I'm sort of for this because I think there needs to be a change. Personally, from a military perspective, most of the leaders in the military have operated, say, in Afghanistan, where we had safe havens as the United States. So operating from safe, secure bases is normal. Operating against a more prominent with significant platforms like Iran is something that hasn't been done in years. And some of us have that experience from way back. And so I think that there's certain things that aren't being executed because we need to pivot quickly. And I think we could do better than what we are. But I think that sort of gives you a snapshot of why I think we went in. It does give us peace in the Middle East. This was the weakest they ever were because of the protesters and economically, that if there was ever an opportunity anytime in the future, this was it. So it was a combination of things, not just one. So complicated. I know went a lot of different places with this of why and how and some of our errors. But honestly, this was probably the only chance anybody would get to do something in Iran to completely eliminate that threat. And like it or not, Trump did make a decision. That is one thing's about action with the guy, if you like him or not. So yeah, it wasn't just the nukes. It was probably the only time that this regime would be completely annihilated, if that can be possible. So yeah.
So interesting, Glenn. You've been absolutely amazing, and I have one more question for you. Should the American people be concerned about national security in a conflict like this?
Good question. So, look, we've seen some individuals. So you're always going to have that lone wolf, either one organized or one who's just off the edge. But here's the thing. Okay, again, apolitical. The borders were open. A lot of people came through, this million or that million, I don't care. But we did find about a significant amount of people on the terrorist watch list that did get in from a variety of different countries. So the concern is how many people from Hezbollah, any type of association with the Iranian government did get in. But I'll tell you one thing, that's where the FBI, the counterterrorism, everything, there are so many things that are happening behind the scenes that have probably been shut down that you will never know about because I think it's scary. So that potential always happens. So, I mean, think about it. It's the summer. You're walking through a mall and you see a dude with a freaking jacked, igloo, jacket on, thinking it's about this stuff. Yeah, there's something probably off about that. So report it. Who cares? If it's off. So I think you need to be a little bit aware. Paranoia sort of keeps you alive, but don't live in fear. I think that is possible, but a lot of this funding organization to some of these terrorist organizations have been decimated. But like I said, a lot of people are working on it. I would still be alert. I'd still be a little paranoid, but I wouldn't live in fear. So I hope that answers it, knowing what we know. Otherwise, we're sort of reading tea leaves on how many, who, what.
Mr. Ignazio, you've been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, you bet, man. Thanks for the opportunity. Appreciate it. Cut through the crap. Thanks.